Let's talk about getting the bag. This time of year, we always talk about players getting, paid. Are they getting like bankroll? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's a very normal relationship within a capitalist society for them to get their cut of the profits of the NBA. So I don't begrudge any player the amount of money that they wind up getting at all. I think we need to turn our brains off and start thinking about it in terms of how do you construct a team in the modern NBA with the assets available to you. Wages are determined by the bitter struggle between capitalist and worker. Pretty cold language, but think about what I just said. How do you construct a team with, the assets available to you? Did it sound to you like I was talking about a talented group of young men with souls? We hoisted at Larry not only because we constructed a team, a calculated thing, but also in reality, before that, we grew it, we nurtured it. And that, I think, is the stage we're at right now. Each plant in the garden will thrive under unique conditions, and some of them are common to one another, such as light, moisture, soil. But the variations of other factors are plant-specific. Every single one of them needs the right place in the garden to thrive. And the real trick is once you've assembled your flowers, trying to nurture them such that they all bloom and come into their own at the same time. In the NBA, getting your garden to do this once is something that before this year's championship, 11 teams have never done. 11 teams. So hanging one banner for us in 2019 was worth whatever the price was. But there's been a hangover. And I'm right with the rest of you fans that feel like, hey, okay, it's time to be ready to compete again. Except now that we have the banner, we have to ask ourselves, how do we become better as NBA gardeners? How do we make it perennial? How do we make something sustainable? And just like in farming, we need to shift our mindset away from constructing to nurturing. And that's why I've chosen a girl band soundtrack today. Because, and I hope you'll allow me the gender generalization here, but the world needs a little more girl power in general. And the way we need to grow our team requires a little more love, tenderness, nurture, care. It needs a non-stereotypical male approach to things if we're gonna make it sustainable. Boys, we can't just ram our assets in because the dollar values work. We need to grow the team. And the good news is the front office is already acting as a nurturing environment for the players. In order to be sustainable, we need to be a place that players want to come back to. Don't you think that means treating the individuals like more than a contract? Questioning a player's motives when they say they want to stay in our city is ridiculous. It's counterintuitive. I can't believe the reaction we had this week to Pascal saying he didn't want to go to another team. Because for those of you hoping to hoist another Larry, it is imperative that we improve on something that's been a hallmark Raptors Achilles heel since our inception, and that's the ability to attract big name players. To do that, we need to be an attractive place and have the word on the street amongst the players be, this is a place to live and raise a family. So that's my little soliloquy on the difference between nurturing the team for perennial gain versus constructing a team to win in 2K. This is not 2K. We're dealing with real people, real souls. Okay, so that sets us up to take a look at how we would approach free agency. And you guys have filled up the comments of the last couple of videos to show me some of the things I missed. So let's go over those now. And here's the comment I want to start with because it really puts things in perspective. We have an amazing crop of young players that we fall in love with as human beings. And it's hard to even consider seeing some of them part. But as Dan says in his comment, and you should pause and read the whole thing, I'm just going to read a portion of it. What's the path to the Larry O'Brien? And can the Flynns and Bantons realistically be taking up roster spots if we expect to hoist another Larry? That is a super sensible sentiment. Lots of S's and alliteration there. But we need to be mindful of this. The thing is, if our window, based on the age ranges on our team, is in the next year or two, which I think it is, then we need to look at what we need to do to be ready to put the finishing touches on the team and go for it, right? just like we did before, except we want to keep sustainability. So we don't want to undermine ourselves this time. The goal is multiple banners this time, or at least competing for them. With that said, let's get to the money.
Touch the earth, I wanna break it in my hands, I wanna grow something wild and unruly.
In the videos leading up to this one, you guys have helped me formulate not what I want the franchise to do, but what I think the signs point to the franchise doing. And in the process of speaking to it, we've really only talked about Houston as a team with money. At least the kind of money that's being talked about in association with Fred. I maintain that that is the case. And you guys are smart, so a whole bunch of you pointed out that I didn't discuss the teams with cap holds here that could be in the free agent market. So they were kind of summed up in one comment, so shout out to Digger Ocean 2000. Now a couple of these are easy, the first one being that we now have 3 two-way contracts we can dole out. That was also caught by other viewers during the live premiere of the last video. Secondly, those two-way contracts don't count towards our cap. So that's found money compared to the numbers I was throwing around in the last vid. But that found money is quickly out the window because Grady's cap hold needs to go on to the money side of things. And then finally, of course, we need to look at these teams that have potential cap space if they choose to strategically use their cap holds. As I said in my other videos, I don't see these other teams as landing spots for Fred, especially when you're talking about the amount of investment required to take him from the Raptors. That's why I maintained I expect Fred to sign a deal more in the ballpark of the Brunson deal, but with the structure of Chris Boucher's contract. It's more expensive up front and then it scales back. It's a team-friendly deal and we can afford to pay Fred more money up front and then have it scale back. When I say it's team-friendly, it's because every year we'll have a little more money to play with as Fred becomes older and maybe takes a bench role. That's a good thing for the team. Why would the player do this? Well, they'll only do it if the overall value of the contract, the sum of all of the years of the contract, total a number that the player is happy with. What number is the player going to be happy with? The answer to that is market value. I don't see, as I said, any of these teams that have even potential cap space wanting to spend $40 million on a veteran influence on the team when they're still in rebuilding stage. If you go all the way down to even OKC, these teams are not at a point where they're necessarily competing yet. And they have a plethora of young guards on their team who are still in competition mode to see who the franchise ultimately goes with. They're not at a point of needing Fred. Therefore, players like Fred and James Harden's value on the open market will go down because these teams are more likely, as I said in my last video, to be in the market of poaching restricted free agents from teams that are hindered by the cap. The teams at the bottom here. These teams are vulnerable to teams that have money this year, especially with the nuances of the new CBA. Rui Hachimura is vulnerable to being poached. Cam Reddish is vulnerable to being poached. Cam Johnson is likely to receive a contract over $20 million this year. Thibault is vulnerable. Grant Williams is extremely vulnerable to leaving Boston. Baisley, same thing. Yurtseven, same thing. You guys have named them. Landau, after his playoff performance, is likely to be leaving the Suns. The list goes on and on. Now, those players might ultimately remain on the teams they're with, but the teams that have their bird rights are going to have to overpay what they wanted to pay for them because these other teams with money are trying to poach them. So to the teams with all the money, it doesn't matter if they ultimately get the player because they've actually hamstrung their competition by driving the price up. With the price on those players going up, there will be less available liquid cash to spend and offer to guys like Fred, James Harden, all of those names. Therefore, teams like Toronto and Philly are more likely to retain those players at a discounted rate. But Gubs, even the discounted rate is potentially enough to take us into the luxury tax. True, but we're forgetting something. We don't have to pay luxury tax until the last day of the season, meaning we can kick the tires on this team, even if it's over the luxury tax threshold, until the trade deadline before we need to make a move to address the luxury tax. Because if this coming year is successful, then we may choose to just go into the tax the following year to run it back again with Pascal and OG re-signed as well. With all of that said, what are the options for the Raptors?
Nicely done. You happy with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it sounded great.
It took a long time, over 16,000 tiny pieces of paper. So each section had their own specific color. So each paper said, during the performance of Cool About It, hold this paper over your phone's flashlight to create a beautiful rainbow. Once the song started playing, they played that first note.
Wait, what? Take a picture of this.
Instantly, all the phones went up, all the colors went up, and it created a huge crowd rainbow, and it was beautiful and completely overwhelming. And it was kind of amazing because the band was just about to start playing and then looked out into the audience and full on stopped the song to take in the view.
I'm gonna not even ask questions.
The band's reaction was really just a cherry on top of the cake.
Now, I know that's not directly basketball related, but it is related to the type of human unity and symbiosis and togetherness that we're trying to foster here in Toronto, and it is emblematic of the proudly woke approach that the Toronto Raptors as an organization show us time and time again they're all about. This tendency is yet another cookie crumb as to why I think the most likely scenario is Fred comes back. It has to do with culture. But let's look at the other potential options. The first one I want to mention is one that a lot of you guys are promoting, and that's that we should usher in the Scotty Barnes era and still keep, some combinations of the older players, but not all of them. Give Scotty a year at point guard. This is totally reasonable, and if that's the case, you could potentially let Jakob and Fred go, and then you would become one of these teams with money. That would be great, and that's a totally viable way to take the franchise. But we dealt away our number one pick and some other draft capital in the form of 2 number 2s, I believe, when we brought in Jakob. So I don't see a full-blown let Fred and Yak walk approach coming, because I think moving those picks signals that we don't plan on having the roster spots for those draft picks, meaning we want more established players coming in. Just like Denver drafted veteran college players who have been to championship situations already in the form of like Brown and the guys they drafted this year, we want to curtail some of our development phase and surround our young guys with players that increase our odds of getting to the dance this season. So I don't see a full-blown let all the vets walk approach happening here, especially after the investment in Jakob. The next scenario is the sign and trade, but I honestly don't see the sign and trade panning out for the Raptors because I don't think, as I said, the market value for Fred is super high. So at the end of the day, we're probably going to fetch a younger player that has potential, but not a vet with a ring on their finger that can help mentor the team. And I know the Raptors community is divided on whether Fred is a good vet to do that or not. And I think that we need to look again at what happened this season with Hydra Ball, the dribble drive into the paint execution. I know a lot of the selfishness is pointed at Nurse for running such a selfish style of basketball, but dribble drive is supposed to often result in kicks. And the kicks that were missing were because the players' reads were not resulting in the kicks to open shooters. They were instead keeping the ball and going up to finish. That's the selfishness. There's nothing selfish about a dribble drive system that tries to draw double teams. There is something selfish if every player keeps the ball and doesn't kick it. I see so many commentaries on the arrival of Darko suggesting that we're no longer going to have any selfish ball or these dribble drive kicks. Dribble drive kicks are part of the modern NBA. We are still going to see dribble drive paint touches trying to draw double teams from Darko. We're just going to be emphasizing better reads when our players get there. That's why I've maintained that systems-wise, this coaching change is going to be a passing of the torch from what Nick was running. This coaching staff is going to pick up where Nick left off and hopefully do a better job of getting the players to make those unselfish reads, kick the ball out, and have more rounded numbers like we see from Pascal and OG, where assist numbers are going up and points totals are resulting in 5 to 6 players on the roster being in double digits at the end of every game, which, by the way, was the hallmark of Nick Nurse's team last year. An achievement that doesn't seem to coincide with the idea of everything across the board being selfish. At the end of the day, only the front office knows for certain which direction they're going to take. And my guess is they don't even know for certain. They probably have various scenarios laid out as to what they're willing to do. And that will be based on what the other teams do. So it's important that we look at the different numbers that are available to us with the mid-level exception, which can be broken to sign multiple players, and also the biannual exception, because that's also available to us this year. The most important thing to note here is that the amount you get is based on where you're positioned relative to the luxury tax threshold, the salary cap, and now the second apron after you surpass the luxury tax. But the values that a lot of people are throwing around for guys like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus are based on like getting them on the MLE. But I'm going to tell you once again that these teams with money or potential money are going to actually drive up the price. For instance, if I'm an under the luxury tax team like the Raptors, then I have $12,404,000 to offer a full MLE to a guy like Gabe Vincent. But any of these other teams with money can offer him $14 million, and suddenly we're out of the talks. So these teams are just like with the RFAs and the free agents. These teams will set the market value for what mid-level exception players are going to fetch this year. So your guess is as good as mine. I think some of the players like Westbrook, Love, D'Angelo Russell, Draymond, they're going to get a lot less than they thought. Same with Fred. And a lot of them will be retained by their original teams for this reason. I think using guys like Jacques Landale as an example of a player that you might offer a biannual to, I think we're going to get priced out of that market as well. I think he's going to get 5, 6, 7, 8 million based on his playoff performance last year from a team with money. The mid-level exception, I think guys like Bruce Brown, Gabe Vincent will go for slightly higher than full MLE to teams with money. So I think we're going to be out of the running for a lot of players like that, and it's going to be more sensible to retain what we have, even if we go slightly past the luxury threshold, in an effort to put the best possible, most competitive team on the court, which to my mind includes Fred and Jakob, and then figure out what to do with them based on performance up to the trade deadline. So I'm as excited as you are to see which direction the franchise goes. Let's talk about Summer League. In addition to the 3 summer leagues, which will be taking place commencing July 3rd, we also have a very exciting event taking place in Toronto that will be hosting Global Jam, and this will showcase so much young talent that's not in the NBA right now. I plan on attending some of the Global Jam events with my kids, and I hope to see you there. And if you decide to attend and see me, please do come up and introduce yourself. Summer League is a time to check out how all of our teams drafted. How did Cam Whitmore actually look on the court for the Rockets this year? That's a big question, right? Did Raphael Stone make out like a bandit? Summer League is one of my favorite times of the year, and I watch a ton of basketball because I love watching the up-and-coming talent. I'm going to end the video by naming a couple of my favorite players to see this year, and I'm only going to name a few. It starts with a few players that we've seen in Summer League before that teams need to make decisions on, and if they decide to move off of them, I'm interested in the player potentially. In no particular order, those players include, back on a 2-way with the Mavericks, Canadian AJ Lawson, 2 players from the Utah Jazz that Danny Ainge is assessing, the first being Vernon Carey, the second being Lucas Samich. I've seen these players play firsthand at the 905. Same with this next player. Former Florida State standout who was with the Knicks G League team last year, MJ Walker. Former Purdue standout Trevion Williams, who has spent time with Boston, Golden State, and was coveted by Washington to the point where they made a trade for him. I maintain that he's one of the best big man passers who just needs a stable environment in order to develop chemistry with his teammates in order to really thrive. And then one of my favorite players from Summer League the last 2 years, Johan Begarin, who continues this French invasion of the NBA. He was a draft and stash pick in the second round by Brad Stevens when he took over drafting for the Boston Celtics. Who are your players to watch this summer? Those are some of mine. It's all about the Larrys, guys. Over the next 2 weeks, I got a couple weddings to do, so I'm back to work. I'm a caterer. I will be back for Summer League and to give my take on what transpired from free agency. While I'm away, I'm relying on all of you to keep me apprised on everything happening in the NBA. And until I'm back, you'll have to satisfy yourselves with talking about our new 6'8" Dick. In regards to the Dick Pics, don't blame me, don't blame Grady, blame Brett. This is Chef's Kiss approved. Mwah!